You are now listening to the Purple Fox Podcast.
Update.
What's going on, everybody? This is Kevin C. Eze with another Purple Fox update. Today, I wanted to get into this research paper that I've been wanting to break down for a while. It's a Pew Research Study called Beyond Red versus Blue, the Political Typologies. Basically, it's a rundown of all of the political sections that we have in the United States. You know, a lot of the times we tend to see things as blue and red, but there's so many different variations, and it's kind of a disservice that we kind of lump everything together into two categories, because that's part of why we see why it's not serving in this day and age. So before I get into this, I just want to say that this is it's a pretty small sample size, not small, but this is pretty sizable, actually, sample size. But this isn't like hard and fast, you know, like these categories or profiles, if you will, aren't like 100% stagnant. You know, they're not for everyone who would float around in those categories. You know, like there's just different variations. Like some people could have vastly different views, even though you would see them as a certain thing. You know, they're people all over the map. You know, there's no monoliths anywhere. You know, it's human beings are each individual. Each individual is their own entity. You know, so there's multitudes of ways that this can show up. So once again, this is Beyond Red versus Blue, the Political Typology. And the study is primarily based on a survey of 10,221 adults conducted on Pew Research Centers nationally. Representative American Trends Panel, the ATP, from July 8th to the 18th of 2021. It also draws from several additional interviews with these respondents conducted since January 2020. So it's a relatively large pool size, so 10,221. And the opening statement is one that I found very interesting. Partisan polarization remains the dominant, seemingly unalterable condition of American politics. Republicans and Democrats agree on very little. And when they do, it often is in the shared belief that they have little in common. Yet the gulf that separates Republicans and Democrats sometimes obscures the divisions and diversity of views that exist within both partisan coalitions, and the fact that many Americans do not fit easily into either one. And that's so true, because I know when I was looking at this, there are so many similarities between some of the three that I'll describe that would probably fit the best inside of the Purple Fox range. You know, and I can see the different things that they liked, and you know, were showing up strongly in their polling, that I could float into either of them. You know, but there's one specifically that I would say I lump myself into, and I'll get into that later. But the first one I want to describe is, or the first three. So there's 9 in total. So I'm going to kind of describe the conservative, and then I'm going to move into the middle, and then I'm going to go towards the left. Actually, I did that the wrong way if I'm doing this. It's like left to right, whatever. So I'm going to go right to left. So the first one is what they called faith and flag conservatives. So that's that typology. That typology they're calling faith and flag conservatives. And this group is mostly older. Only like 8% are under the age of 30. So that's interesting. Along with what they call the populist right, they have the highest share who identify as non-Hispanic white. 6 in 10 are men, and that's 50%, 58% of the ones polling in this typology are men. And along with committed conservatives, which I'll also talk about, they are the most likely to live in rural communities. So what they're calling faith and flag conservatives mostly live in rural communities. That's mostly like the middle belt, what you'll talk about when you say, most people call it rudely the Bible Belt. It's a crude way of describing that, but they lean on faith. They lean on patriotism. That's what they know. That's it's in their blood. They're most likely sign up to the military, and they're very patriotic. That's their linchpin. That's what they live for. They stand for. What's interesting is that this group largely watches Fox News. So this is 74% within this survey that polled into this typology. They get their news from Fox News. So you can see where they lean on that one. And the next one within the conservative three, they call committed conservatives, and this is the other side of what most would call neo-libs. This is what I call a neocon. And many people do. Many people call them neocons. So they're the conservative lean, but they're also still largely corporatist in a way. Um, about 8 in 10, 82% are white, 1 in 10 Hispanic, and far smaller shares Asian 3%, Black 1%. Um, Mostly older white men, 50 and older. Um, this group is one of the highest earning income conservatives. So they're the conservatives with the highest income. So they polled them within the study, and most of them said that their income and their earnings were either strong, like very strong, or really good. That's where they lean towards the more financial side of the conservative spectrum. And this is where you start to get into those differentiations between like people like Mitt Romney. So you have like a Mitt Romney who would fall into this category, and then you have someone like maybe Lindsey Graham who would fall into one of the other ones, like Faith and Flag, maybe, or maybe one of the other ones I'll talk about, populist right. I think Lindsey Graham would probably fall more into the populist right section, which I'll go over next. But the committed conservative, or the neocon, so nearly 7 in 10 committed conservatives, 69% rate their personal financial situation as either excellent or good, compared with half of the United States adults in that survey. And identical shares say that they have an IRA, a 401k, or a similar type of retirement account, making this typology group more likely to have some kind of savings, some kind of like financial stability. 53% say they have investments in stocks and bonds and mutual funds, that kind of thing. So the next typology, and this is the one that's kind of changing the Republican Party as we see it. Some of the faith and flag are as well. Most of the faith and flag support Donald Trump, mostly because of single issues like abortion, that kind of thing. But the populist right is largely, I would say, with Donald Trump. That's like, he's like their jam, you know. So they reject liberal education in that way. Most of them haven't gone to college. They are one of the typology groups with the lowest share of college graduates. Just under half, so 45%, have a high school diploma or less education, while 34% have some kind of college education, but not a 4-year degree. So trade schools, maybe JC, up to a certain level, just so you can be competitive in a certain market. Some places, some things like electricians, you don't need to go to a 4-year institution to do that. So maybe largely blue collar, but still making it work. about half of the populist right say that their personal finances are either fair or poor in shape, similar to the share of all US adults, so 48% in the survey. Um, their average income level is similar to the public overall, though they are somewhat more likely than average to live in middle income households. So 53% would say that they live in a middle income structure or bracket. And it's interesting to me how this group starts to split from what I call neocons. You know, these are people who are largely warping. I'm not sure I would say for the better, the Republican Party in a way that the focus is now shifting more towards the people, or they're trying to get it to shift towards the people. Whereas, people like Mitch McConnell sort of like kowtow to the corporations that sponsor him. There's that meme that's always circulating where like Mitch McConnell's like tattooed with, not Mitch McConnell's always like tattooed with like the different things that the different brands that he kowtows for, and pushes legislation for. But this group is like all in for Trump. They're the drain the swamp crowd. You know, they know there's corruption in Washington. I'm not sure their direction, like where they're directing their frustration, is exactly accurate. I mean, it's all corporatists they're trying to attack, but it seems like most of the time they attack neoliberals, which is still a big part of the problem because I would say neoliberals are fudging up the system pretty much as well. But the neocons are like Michael Bolton. Is it Bolton? Michael Bolton? Bolton, the guy who was one of Trump's advisors, like war hawks, war profiteers, that kind of thing. You might find them in gun markets, uh, defense contractors, that kind of thing. Those are mostly people who fall into the neocon category. But the populist right are largely against that. Um, so this crowd as well is a big consumer of Fox News. So you don't really start to see the Fox News interest leaving until you get to this sort of conservative split that starts to go into the middle. And what they call that typology is called ambivalent right. And this one is interesting to me. And I've honestly started to listen to more of people who I would consider in this lane, because I've wanted to understand the conservative mindset, but there aren't too many conservatives, in my opinion, who approach things from a philosophical perspective, with an intellectual tinge or leaning. And this is the kind of conservative that starts to get into that. I find that very interesting. This is where you'll see people like Sagar Njit. I don't know if you can see I'm wearing the Rising sweater back in the day when they were still in Rising, Crystal and Sagar. But Sagar Njit, I would say he's in that. Rachel Bovard, Emily Jashinsky. Those kind of conservatives that can respectably debate with the left in a way that they can convey their points and you can hear them, you can digest it. It's not just partisan attacking. It's not there's a willing give and take between the ideas that are being passed back and forth. So the ambivalent right are younger and more racially and ethnically diverse than other Republican oriented groups. They're also somewhat less religiously affiliated. And that's one thing that starts to be interesting in this survey is that you start to see they bring religion into it, and you start to see that the younger crowd start to become more and more uh, religiously unaffiliated. It's like the older you are, the more religious you are, the younger you are, those things start to fall away, and that starts to become very interesting, regardless if you're on the right or the left. It's just something that starts to happen. Um, the so they are similar to the general population, ambivalent, right? On both household income and education, 28% live in lower income housing, compared to 31% of all US adults in the survey. 48% live in middle income housing, and 19% in upper income housing. So it's you can find an ambivalent conservative on either side of the economic spectrum, which is I find very interesting. And a third, 35%, have a college degree, roughly the same share as among the adult population in the survey overall. Um, and this is where you see they're less likely to start to watch Fox News. So it's still somewhat of an amount. 50% report watching Fox News at least sometime during the week. But it starts to largely pull towards more independent, moderate sources of media, where that sort of partisan spin isn't like this. I'm sure this crowd can kind of see through that. It's not something that they readily ingest, you know. And then this is probably the category I would lump myself into, this and probably the next one I'll describe. And this one, this typology they call a stressed sideliner. So who are they? Stressed sideliners. Majority of stressed sideliners are 56% women, the adults polled in this survey. 56% women. So you see largely women in this category. Roughly 6 in 10, 57% are white, while 21% are Hispanic, 10% are Black, 5% Asian. They generally look similar to U.S. adults overall in terms of age. 18% are under the age of 30, 34% between 30 and 49, 31% are 50 to 64, 17% are 65 and older. Stress sideliners, religious affiliation and practices largely parallel the population as a whole. And this group, there's no real trust in any party, you know, whether it's the left or the right. They just want people to tell them what's going on. That's why, hence the word stressed. So they're a stressed sideliner. You know, they don't know who's telling them the truth. You know, and they're looking for the person who's going to serve their interests the most. Um, this one I found interesting. Their level of education, and again, these things are this isn't like the entire U.S. population, so it's hard to, you know. But these are the 10,000 or so people that they pulled. In terms of their education, the stress sideliners have less formal education and lower household income than other groups. Nearly half, 48%, have only a high school diploma or less education, while 29% have some college experience but no degree, and 22% have a college degree. About 1 in 4, 43%, live in lower income housing, with just 10% living in upper income housing. And stress sideliners are the most likely of any other group to say they have some kind of savings. So they're less likely to say that they have any kind of savings. And this is like a third. A third of this group are probably just trying to make it work. You know, they can't really save up. They're probably working paycheck to paycheck. They don't know. They don't know where they're aligned to align themselves and who's gonna, you know, best serve their interests. Um, yeah. And so the next group, which is I would say I consider myself somewhere between stress sideliner and outside left, which is the next typology. So who are they? Who are the outside left? Outsider left are by far the youngest political typology group. So this is one of the youngest typology groups. 4 and 10 are under the age of 30, uh, and 83% are under 50. So they're very young. There's no boomers in this category, or hardly any. They are racially and ethnically diverse. About half, 49%, are white. 20% are Hispanic, 15% are Black, and 10% are Asian. and women make up 57% of this group. So again, like I'm starting to notice that within the survey that the women are floating towards the middle in a certain way. Um, there's higher percentages of them in these middling or middle typologies. And this group, I would say, because I have somewhat familiarity with this group, based on the polling and the surveys, they they lean towards the left, but they just don't agree with neoliberal agenda. And I'm right there with them because you know you they want to be on the left, but at the same time they just don't like the direction it's going, and that's why a lot of the times you see them leaning towards the middle, and a lot of the times it's kind of like the populist middle, if that's even a lane. I don't know if I mean that's kind of what we try to define here at the in the foxhole is a sort of like populist middle lane, and these people are like ripe for that kind of direction. Um, so outside left also has somewhat less formal education than the establishment liberals, which I'll talk about later, uh, or the progressive left. So 35% have at least a college degree. 2 in 10 members of this group are either full-time or part-time students, 14% and 6% respectively. Um, this group, about half of the outside left, 55%, say that their personal finances are in fair or poor shape. So it's it's interesting to me that the only people doing well financially are the neocons and the neolibs, as you'll see as I keep going on. Um, and then everyone else is like trying to like make it work in the middle. They're either lower income, mostly middle income, and they're the majority in a way, you know. But then you see these fringe groups that are on the outside just trying to make it work, trying to find out who to trust, trying to find the best elected official for them. But they can't really catch a break, because these two pillars, these two sets of establishments, are kind of like washing everybody out. It's very interesting. Um, and what's interesting about this group specifically is that over 48% of them expect their financial situation to be better a year from now. So this survey was done somewhat in the middle of 2021. And for some reason, they expect their financial situation to increase compared with 36% of the public who say that it won't. Um, and I'm not sure where this confidence comes from. Yeah, maybe this crowd is most likely the crowd to start retail investing. I know that's what I have been doing. So maybe that's why they're like, okay, we see the game, we have a good handle on it. This is what we're going to start doing, and that makes the most sense to me in terms of why that would be that kind of polling. Um, outside left are one of the least religiously affiliated groups, which it goes in line with what I was saying before. This is one of the youngest typologies, and the younger they get, the more religiously unaffiliated they are, which is very interesting. Uh, which leads into this next category, which is the more democratic tinge. The democratic mainstays. This is, besides the faith and flag community, one of the most religious communities. And true to what I've been saying, they're one of the oldest typologies. So 6 in 10 Democratic mainstays are women. A majority, 55%, are ages 50 and older, including 27% who are 65 and older. Yeah. Democratic mainstays are among the most diverse groups in terms of race and ethnicity. Fewer than half, 65, are white, 26% are black. That's one of the biggest. This is one of those groups. These are the people who came out in droves. The older crowd, the older white crowd, older black crowd, older Hispanic crowd that came out for Joe Biden in mass numbers. Because they just wanted to defeat Trump at any cost. So these are the people that you saw them interviewing on things like MSNBC and CNN, where they're like, I've been a lifelong Democrat, and I don't see myself changing at any time. These are these people. They call them mainstays. Um, Three-quarters of Democratic mainstays, 75%, are religiously affiliated. 75%. And this is the older crowd, like I've said. The highest share among the Democratic-oriented groups. A quarter of Democratic mainstays are Catholic, while 43% are Protestant. Democratic mainstays have the largest share of Black Protestants of the political typology group, 20%. Democratic mainstays are more likely than those in other Democratic-oriented groups to say practicing their religion is one of the most important things in their life. That's a very interesting statistic. So, neolibs, or what they call the typology establishment liberals. Who are they? Establishment liberals are one of the two most educated typology groups, alongside the progressive left, which I also find interesting that the progressive left is one of the most educated as well. Members of this group are 15 percentage points more likely than U.S. adults overall to have a college degree. So consider this. Out of all the adults polled in this survey, this group is 15 percentage points above those in terms of who goes to college. So this group largely leans on education, and this is what the right would call the group that is like brainwashing your kids and teaching them lib speak like Latinx and things like that. They are also among the most well-traveled typology. Nearly 2 in 10, 19%, say they have visited 10 or more countries outside of the United States. Damn, that's a lot of travel. 10, I think I've probably gone to like three countries. Man. Airports don't count. I would say a lot more, but airports don't count. Establishment liberals are similar to U.S. adults overall in age. 90% of this group are between the ages of 18 and 29. That surprised me. So 19% of this group are 18 to 29. I don't know many 18 to 29-year-olds who are, well, actually, you know what? It does make sense because for the longest time, before I actually got wise to what was happening, I was very much on this Democratic. I remember at one point, I supported Hillary Clinton. I remember wanting to if I had been old enough before the 2008 election to vote in that primary, I probably would have voted for Hillary Clinton. But I voted for Obama that fall when I turned 18 in September. So, man, yeah. So I can imagine that there'd be a certain percentage, 19%, that are from 18 to 29 who are neolibs in that way. I can't imagine that now. 34% are ages 30 to 49. 24% are 50 to 64. And 23% are 65 and older. This typology group is roughly tied for the second highest share of Black adults of any typology group, 18%, compared with 15% outside left, though both trail in 26% of Democratic mainstays. So the biggest typology of Black voters is the Democratic mainstays. This is the second largest, the establishment liberals. About 2/3 of establishment liberals, 68%, report getting political news from CNN. So you see the other side of the spectrum. You see committed conservatives and faith and flags supporting Fox News, and then you see this tinge heading over to CNN. I'm surprised MSNBC wasn't part of it, but 68% report CNN, making the cable news network their most used source out of 26 major outlets asked about in March 2021. Now we get into the progressive left. 68% white adults. 68%. That really surprised me. So 68% of progressives are white adults. I would imagine there would be more minorities who would fall into this category, but I mean, at the same time, they are polling just 10,221 people. But yeah, that was very surprising to me. Um, making this group less racially and ethnically diverse than the other Democratic-oriented groups, though still more diverse than the three conservative categories, which makes sense. They are the second youngest political typology. Outside the left are the youngest. They are substantially younger than the overall population. About a third, 34%, are under the age of 30. 71% are under the age of 50. And they are, along with the establishment liberals, one of the highest likely to go to college. Roughly half, 52%, are religiously unaffiliated, also because younger, trending down. And that's I wonder where religion is going to be in the conversation in our future, because it seems as though the generations, largely millennial generations and the generations to come are just like leaving in droves. I was raised Catholic, although I still hold those principles and the morality of Catholicism. Largely, I don't really practice anymore. But that everything I do will be forever tinged with that kind of structure. But yeah, I just see younger and younger crowds leaving in droves, and I wonder what that's going to be in the future. Um, so roughly two-thirds, 68%, say that they would prefer to live in, and this was interesting, in a community with smaller houses that are closer together. Also, the highest of any typology group, um, uh, to say that living in tighter communities is better versus having your own plots of land. It's very interesting that they would think in that way, and it makes sense because I don't know if it's by necessity of their interest, what they want to, or what they have to do. Because I know most people are having a hard time finding work right now, and it's easier to live with like five of your friends in like a condo or a flat or something than to try and get your own house. I don't know many millennials who have bought their own house. It's a very rare thing, um, unless you have it. Like your parents helped you out or something. I don't know many people who are in my generation and below who have purchased their own house right now. It's very rare. And this group, in terms of media, leans more towards institutions like NPR, National Public Radio, and the New York Times. I don't really consider them very. They have like a, I don't know. To me, they have somewhat of a neoliberal tinge. But I mean, I can see if they want the both sides of that spectrum, because NPR leans very liberal. But yeah. So things like NPR, New York Times, they stay away from the cable news networks. You know, even though they should watch to know what's going on. I like to turn it on every once in a while to see what's going on. But yeah. Um, Yeah, so those are the typologies, those are what they broke down in this Pew Research Study. Um, and I just it's a disservice when we lump things into two categories, because like we've just seen, there are so many variations on the type of American there can be in our discourse. There's so many, and there's so much overlap. Some of the statistics overlap. Like I know a lot of the populist right, and the like from the populist right to the progressive left, they have a lot of overlap. Like they all consider that we should tax the rich more. That's like one of the biggest agreements that they have. There's so many things that immigration, some of these categories that you wouldn't think would associate with each other, would have similar perspectives on immigration. Things like tradition, religion. Some of the older crowds that are even on the different ends of the spectrum. So it just doesn't serve the way we look at our politics today. Um, we need to come together, I would say, with healthy debate. I think that's the only way that we actually bridge the divides and the divisions in our society right now. Um, we need to develop the skill where we can hear opposition, the things that we disagree with, and take it in and come back respectfully with our counters. Instead of this sort of like violent backlash all the time. You don't agree with me, so I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want you in my space. You're blocked if it's social media. Families get torn apart at holidays and Thanksgivings and Christmases, and you know cities are divided in politics, and healthy debate is the only way I see this melding back together. Um, I mean, the way I deal with this and the rampant divisions in our nation right now is I like to find unifying voices, objective voices. I love what Andrew Yang's doing right now. The Forward Party is such a positive movement. I don't know if you know what's going on. You can watch his or listen to his podcast Forward and find out all the ideas that he's banting back and forth with his staff and his people. Um, yeah, they're positive move. Crystal and Sagar, having both a conservative and a liberal take, and then meeting in the middle to agree on find the points of intersection. Those are the unifying voices that I see in our society right now that I kind of lean to, and that's how I stay sane in what's happening right now, this culture war, if you will. Um, the biggest takeaway I got from this survey, I would say, is that our media is incredibly damaging. Our media is one of the biggest forces that helps to separate us and move this divide even further. And the crazy thing is that it's all for money. It's all for ratings. These people became celebrities overnight. Your Chris Cuomo's, look at him now. Your Rachel Maddow's, your Brian Williams's, your Laura Ingram's, your Tucker Carlson's. They're just it's not. I don't think anyone can logically call what's happening healthy. And you've got to find those unifying voices in the midst of this media storm that's happening. Um, find these positive movements. Find the Forward Party. Um, find organizations that are looking to create multiple political parties, which is another fix I see to our largely systemic problem. And organizations that are promoting those are that's our way out of this. We have to find those avenues of change, because otherwise People talk about civil war, but we're not that far away from that. Something to think about. No one wants to come to blows. It's been largely words so far, but it can get there. Think about it. This has been your Purple Fox Update. I'm Kevin Eze, signing out.